Well, Australian banks are offering cultural leave and counselling for Indigenous staff upset by the referendum result. Personally, I think they should offer counselling to customers upset by branch closures, but that's just me imagining a fairy tale world in which corporations stuck to their core business. The Herald Sun reported today that the National Australia Bank was offering a range of wellbeing support, including cultural leave for Indigenous colleagues and a dedicated Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander support line. As well, KMPG were offering to run yarning circles so Indigenous staff could, quote unquote, heal, which begs the question, heal from what? Democracy? Suncorp, meanwhile, don't offer cultural leave, but did say to Indigenous staff they're welcome to take other leave if they're really upset by the vote. Suncorp's diversity and inclusion leader, Katharina Behan, wrote on her LinkedIn page, "Imagine the devastating blow to hope. The very loud message of rejection, the overt refusal to even come to the same table." Well, is it any wonder that staff needed counselling when senior executives are telling them your hope has been decimated and the whole country has rejected you? Now, according to the Herald Sun, she put a little note on LinkedIn clarifying these were her personal views, not those of Suncorp. Well, that's called Suncorp Insurance, because Suncorp are based in Queensland, where 70% of people voted no. So it's not great for business to insinuate that 70% of your potential customer base are raging racists trying to deny Indigenous people of hope. You know, to suggest that Indigenous staff, Caleb, are so fragile that a mooted bureaucratic body in Canberra is not going to be established after all, that they're going to need special counselling, that's incredibly disempowering to Indigenous people. I mean, to say you're going to have a referendum to help Indigenous people and then, when you lose that referendum, to tell Indigenous people, well, you're now worse off than you have ever been, hardly strikes me as particularly caring.
Well, it's the point. That is the point, is to make them as put upon as possible. So once you can make it a reality, once you make the victimhood a reality, you've got something to work on. And of course, we know these lefties, if there isn't some sort of victimhood to look after, whether it be based on race or gender or, I don't know, whether or not their car's got enough fuel in it, there's always something they've got to have, they're a victim of, and that gives them a reason to get up in the morning and shout at the world because you fascist bastards, how dare you. Melbourne University brought this exact same thing in last week, before the referendum result had even come down. Right. They were anticipating the failure, which anyone with half a brain did. But they were talking about in an email they'd sent out to staff, and a couple of people who worked at the uni sent it to me, saying, I can't believe we're actually doing this, saying, we understand the burden that this discussion of the Voice to Parliament has had on our Indigenous students and staff. We're going to make available to specifically Indigenous students and staff 10 days of leave that they can take any time between now and the end of the year. And we also acknowledge that Indigenous academics who have had to commentate on the Voice, that is an extra burden as well. Well, I thought as an academic, commentating on an area that was your specialty was actually your job. Right. It's not a burden, is it? But it's just more of this paternalism that we were told that the Voice was meant to fix. And it was clearly the exact opposite, because all the Voice was, if you want to go down the Lydia Thorpe line, and she's not wrong, I suppose, in saying it, is that it's a concept by the white man for the black man to tell the white man how they should conduct their business. Right. So it was essentially a perpetuation further of that paternalism. And this is exactly the same. We're saying, oh, we're so sorry for everything that's happened. Why don't you have a little bit of leave? Yeah. Can we not have normal democratic discussions in this country without condemning everyone as having been hurt or that they're going to be hurt?
Can you just imagine, though, the amount of staff now who work for KPMG, ANZ, Westpac, NAB, they were all named in this article being like, yeah, actually,
give me the time
I've
off.
been affected emotionally, spiritually, mentally, even physically. It's really actually impacted upon me massively. But as this article mentions, particularly those banks I just reeled off, once again, These are foreign-owned. Their major shareholder is Vanguard BlackRock. And this agenda, despite the failure of the referendum, is going to continue to be pushed by the corporates who poured millions of dollars into the yes vote, because this wasn't just a one-time wham bam, thank you ma'am referendum. Now it's all over. No, this is a phenomenon that we've seen sweep across the West. And even though so far it has failed to take ground here, these corporates are going to continue to use their money, to use their influence to push the exact same narrative. That's what we're seeing now. That's what we will continue to see. And it's why we have a Western world that is currently going through this entire convulsion together. Throughout the West, there's this deep hatred of the West being born. We're seeing in our schools, our universities, our children are being taught to hate our heritage, our culture, etc., and so on. So buckle in for it, because this has not gone away just because there was a very resounding no from the Australian people. These guys have an agenda. It wasn't homegrown, and they're going to continue to try and roll it out.
I mean, evidence of that is, to my knowledge, we haven't seen Indigenous people say, hey, we're going to need counselling, we're going to need help because of a no vote. We've seen, these banks, they've initiated it.
Exactly.
Cricket Australia came out, a week and a half ago and said, we're going to offer counselling to people. So they are grooming, maybe that's not the best word, but they are setting Indigenous people up to feel aggrieved and to make sure that you know that you really need our help. It's quite wrong.
And again, it's the white man doing it to the black man to meet their own lefty ends, right? It just makes you really glad that your mortgage has gone through the roof so you can give more and more of your money to the banks, doesn't it?